In what has become, I'd say, a triptych of kind of career advice videos. First, that one there about ghostwriting, let that do its thing. And then this one here about assisting a composer. I've kind of talked about how to break through ghostwriting and through assisting composers. And it's raised a load of comments, which I really thank you for. A few issues, a few queries, a few disagreements. And I just want to kind of round off these three films with a summary of thoughts from myself. The first one that I think is really important to talk about is I accept that assisting a composer is probably the safest route into media composition, much easier than becoming a successful recording artist. I accept that the way from becoming a composer's assistant into being a full-fledged HOD, head of department of your own, is likely to involve some ghostwriting. The composer's done A and he's done B and he needs you to get from A to B, and you write the bit in the middle, and then you're asked to write another cue, and then you're asked to write kind of co-write a film, and then you get your first additional music credit, and then you get a kind of co-credit, and then eventually you're charged with duties as an HOD, maybe with your composer being an executive music producer, that kind of thing. That is a common trodden path. But I think one of the main questions that comes up, sorry if it's really blusty today by the way, is, okay, so how do I become a composer's assistant? How do I get noticed? One of you argued that my concept of this idea of being geographically mindful of where you are is old hat, is old-fashioned. You can be anywhere and write music and create music and submit music for the applied crafts, i.e. TV, film, games. You are correct, naturally, but that is once you become an HOD. If you want to become a composer's assistant, I do recommend you move to a creative hub. I would regard London and LA as the key hubs. There's a lot of activity in Berlin, in New York, in Tokyo, but it seems to be of a different kind of financial order. So the demand for composers' assistants, the need for ghostwriting, I think you'd find lesser so. What you need to do is readjust what your objectives are. If you just see it as, I want to become a media composer, and I'm going to do that by becoming a composer's assistant, then I think that your bandwidth is too small. In fact, what you want to do, and what is inevitable if you're going to be successful, is you want to become part of a community, and the community that you want to be part of is people who work in applied music, whether that be music editors, engineers, assistants, engineers, composers, etc., etc. So all you have to do is think to yourself, how do you become part of a community? Well, I think you need to be present geographically. I think it's about simply making friends, breaking bread and drinking beer or wine with these people, telling jokes, offering to help people out. Can I shovel your lawn? You don't have to pay me for it. You don't even have to give me credit for it. Say you were moving town. How would you, go and introduce yourself to your neighbours, that kind of stuff. It's becoming part of a community, not having this raw ambition to be this kind of singular character, and the only route through that is via another singular character. The people who are going to be hanging out, the people who are going to be breaking bread and staying up far too late are going to be the younger, more junior members of this community. So that in itself is a way in, and using various degrees of separation to work your way up the echelons of influence, power, I guess, and people who have the ability to give you a break. A way into this community naturally can be via social media, but to not put yourself physically present within these communities, well, you're just going to be competing with people who are. So yes, you can approach composers directly via their website, but naturally you don't want to pester people. Don't be a crazed stalker, but be meticulous about the contacts that you get in contact with. Maybe note when you have spoken to them once every 6 months. For me, people have persevered. They've come to me when I've been really busy and I've gone, no, and I haven't responded to their email. And then they may come back to me and say, listen, you wrote to you a few months back, just wondering if it's possible to get a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, to get some advice. When I have had one-on-ones with people, tend to be maybe slightly more negative than I am to this vlog, because I don't want this vlog to become a grumpy one, but talking about the real challenges that we face in this day and age, both financially but also politically, and with the colourful characters that we get in this industry. I would also suggest attending events. There are loads of seminars, certainly in these hubs. There tends to be meet and greets afterwards. As I mentioned before, Oliver became my assistant after simply approaching me after I did a talk at BAFTA, joining BASCA, joining PRS, and checking out their events and initiatives is a good way not only to go and meet other composers, but it's just for your face to be seen. A lot of the composers who are really coming up the ranks now are faces that I've seen repeatedly at these events, whether they be Q&As, there are things at the ICA. I'm obviously speaking with a London bias, but I think just being seen to be part of the scene I think is very, very important. And this goes with the actual act of being a composer's assistant, because it's likely you will get to a point where you will be attending orchestral sessions and you will get to know the music crews, but also you'll get to know the engineers and the assistants at these big studios. And to be seen as one of these faces, as part of the business, I think is an invaluable string to your bow. And I think it's important that you don't have to aim particularly high, come down to lowly individuals like, I don't know, me. Often a composer who's higher up the echelons than me will contact me and say, listen, I really need some help on this. Is there someone that you could vouch for? And when I vouch for people, it's someone who is meek, will keep their mouth shut, and is reliable. I believe I recommended someone assisting and doing additional music for a quite big composer recently on a really major project, and that's been a real opening. I think the important point for me is, as I've mentioned before, I do see people with the determination and the zeal that is required to break through in this industry. And where I see comments saying, problem is this, and I've tried this, and this hasn't worked, so I've given up on that idea. Well, I just simply would say, with all due respect, I don't think you're doing it right, because some people are absolutely nailing it. I mean, if you're a terrible self-publicist, if you're very bad around the company of people, then I would suggest that actually this craft form is not for you, because it is a collaborative one. The thing I've never really mentioned on this vlog, I've implied it, but I've never mentioned it is a cutthroat industry. So if you're not prepared to relocate, to get out to the ICA, to get out to BAFTA, to the NFT, to these events, these socials, all of that kind of stuff, well, you're simply going to be up against people who are cutthroat, who are willing to work for composers, to keep their mouth shut, to be meek, to not ask for publishing rights when it's not deserved, to not ask for credits which they are not going to get. There are swathes of people who love the idea of writing music to picture, and really, from what I've seen, it is a war of attrition, not only at entry point, but right through the gates, through being an assistant, being an additional music maker, a ghostwriter, if you will, to being a collaborator, to being an HOD. It is a war of attrition with a very high attrition rate. I would go back to that point I made earlier of, people like day 2 or 3 of actually seeing what it's like to be a head of department at the end of a production cycle. It is terrifying. The hours are hard, the demands are great, and it doesn't seem to put people off. This is why when someone who is in their mid-30s, early 40s comes to me and goes, planning on doing a career change, going to break into media composition, I always go, this is a very difficult conversation you're going to have with your family, because you're not going to see them for 10 years, and you're also not going to be bringing much money in for 10 years. I mean, you can earn okay as a composer's assistant, but again, there is kind of a race to the bottom because it's so competitive. Where being noticed as a composer in your own right is concerned, well, this is a kind of a bigger subject, but I just will always maintain that listen to what everyone else is doing and don't do that. Ghostwriting, a lot of you kind of raised total concerns about being exploited. You can avoid that by simply, trying to write what the composer would write if he or she had time. I really genuinely don't think that writing the odd noodle, the odd chord sequence, doing some extraordinary beats, something slightly melodic, really warrants you worrying about the rights that you've given up and that you've been done over. It's all about experience. The Goodfellas kind of aspect of what I talked about is not the dark thing. It's not keep your fucking mouth shut, otherwise, you know, you're going to get shanked and you'll never work in this industry again. It's more about there being a code, us being a band of brothers, and from what I can see, I don't really ever see composers rip other composers off. I can't speak the same about the pop dance industries. I know that there are people who are more curators than composers who take the credit out there, but I just don't see any examples of this anywhere in our field of film, TV, games making. Don't see yourself as being exploited. See it as an investment you're making in your future. If you feel exploited, don't repeat the exercise, put it down to experience. I'm going to get up now and get off because I've got a really cold and wet arse. I'm trying to look like this is comfortable. It's absolutely freezing and I'm sitting in a lot of rabbit shit which is soaking into my underpants. On that thought, thanks as always for watching. I'm going to be getting back into the shed for some seriously nerdy stuff in the run-up to Christmas. I've got a bunch of new kit to show you and a bunch of techniques that I want to share. There's a bunch of questions you guys have asked that I wanted to answer, but I just wanted to jump on. I did the ghostwriting thing and felt, jeepers, I really need to talk about being a composer's assistant, and then both of those films I think left some unanswered questions which I hope I've dealt with here. Thanks as always for watching. Please comment below if you've liked what I've done. A thumbs up would be awesome and gorgeous, and if you want to be notified the next time I put a film up, just ding that bell. See you next time.